All right, we are back with a new video, and today we'll be updating the power rankings for Celebrity Big Brother 3 following week 1. I am recording this on Sunday afternoon, February 6th. So everything I'll be talking about will be up to that point. I will not be including anything that has happened since then. And obviously, this will be a bit different from the power rankings I've done for Survivor and Amazing Race, where obviously, while I do talk about game position on those, a lot of those are based off Edgic and what the edit is saying. But obviously, with a show like Big Brother, I can't really go off that. So this will be based purely off game position and where I think these people could be going moving forward. And one other thing I'll mention is that this will include live feed spoilers, including HOH results and nominations. So if you don't want to be spoiled upon that, be sure to click out of this video. But with that out of the way, let's get started. So starting off the list at number 11, we have the first boot of the season. We have Teddy Mellencamp. Now, again, she was the first boot of the season, and it didn't seem like it at first, but obviously with Misha winning HOH, obviously she was bound to be targeted as a result. But obviously she did start off the game in that terrible of a position where she was obviously second in the HOH comp. She was initially part of the Formation Alliance, and she's really the only person to be neither attached to the Carson side of things or to the athlete side of things, like with Misha and Todrick. Even so, it appears that Carson and Cynthia were getting closer to her, and that's actually a big reason why she ended up being targeted. Misha wanted to secure the numbers for her side of things, like obviously, especially as uh, her side of things started to distance themselves more from the Carson and Cynthia side of things. It became necessary for her to take out Teddy without making it seem like that big of a move to be going after the Carsons and Cynthias of the world. And obviously, we see her get backdoored after Carson wins the veto. And obviously, we did see Carson and Cynthia try to save her. They even got Catan on their side. So obviously, it ended up being a 5-3 vote. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough. And she was the first boot of the season. I don't think she played the worst game in the world, but obviously, she's the first boot here. Not really much to say beyond that. And she's here at number 11. And with that, we're moving on to the 10 people still in the game. And obviously, I'll be ranking them by how likely I think it is that they'll win the game based on their current game position and what they've done to build relationships with the people inside of the game. But at number 10, the person I think is the least likely to win the game is Kriskatan. Now, it's a little weird to be talking about him here as obviously he is on the block this week, but he's not the main target as we see Kirkpatrick going after Mirai more than anyone else. And even beyond that, there's a good chance that he'll remain the pawn even if Mirai wins the veto. But at the end of the day, like Catan hasn't really been playing the game. I mean, he's not really a part of any group. Like he's not. I mean, he's kind of aligned with the Carsons and Cynthias of the world, but he's not really that close to them. And he's also not really in the Misha and athlete side of things either. Like he's kind of on his own, and that's a big reason why Kirkpatrick put him up as a pawn. Is that obviously by putting him up as a pawn, he wasn't really burning any social capital. Like and again, it's understandable as well. Now I know there's been some talk or concern that Tan's probably not in the best state of mind to be playing a game like Big Brother. Like there's concerns about his mental health. Like and obviously we see that by him just not really doing anything. Like he just like spends a lot of the day lying in bed, not really doing much. And it's obviously a concern. And obviously, if there is something going on, then obviously I support him like getting better. But if we're just talking about the game, like he's not playing particularly well. Like I don't really think he's in it to win it per se. And he's not the only person that I feel that way about. But considering his position, the fact that he doesn't really have that many close allies, and the fact that he was put up so easily as a pawn without causing much repercussions is a big reason that I have him here at number 10. Now we're moving on to number 9, and we actually have the HOH's main target for this week. We have Mirai. Now, I kind of wanted to put Mirai a bit higher as, again, she is a relatively big fan of the show. She's definitely one of the more strategic people involved in the game, and through that, I really support her and I want to see her go further. But obviously, if we're looking at these first two rounds, like she's been in quite a bit of danger. I mean, obviously, early on, she's part of the formation, and Misha did approach her to join like her contingent of things, but obviously asked her to be a pawn in the process, which in turn caused Mirai to tell Teddy about it, which obviously sketched out Misha. and she was eventually put up as a pawn. And there was consideration of her being a target by Misha, but at the end of the day, she stuck with Teddy. But then, obviously, in week two, she obviously had Kirkpatrick win HOH, which was her worst case scenario. Kirkpatrick was one of the few HOH people that would have targeted her had he won HOH. That ended up happening, and obviously, she's now on the block, and she's being targeted. Now, at the time of recording, the veto has not happened yet. So obviously, if she wins veto, then obviously she'll be taken off. However, her survival in the game is largely dependent on her winning that veto. Now, to her credit, she does have allies on her side. Like she has people like Misha and Todrick fighting for her. I feel like even if she were to stay on the block, there is a possibility that Misha and Todrick could make a move to try to save her. The question is, will they? And I'm not too sure if they will at this point. But obviously, even aside from that, again, she was on the block. In the first round, there was a possibility of her being the target there. And, like you could say what you want about her relationship with Kirkpatrick. Obviously, there was some drama involved to where Kirkpatrick was burned by her to the point where he wanted to target her. Now, there's some questionable stuff involved with that. Like we don't fully know the context yet, but it still ended up happening, and obviously with Kirkpatrick being in the HOH, she's now in this terrible position. So because of that, I have her here at number 9. Now we're moving on to number 8, and before this latest round, I would have actually had this person in the tier with uh Kriskatan, but after some stuff happened with Mirai being in a lot of danger now, I decided to have this person a bit higher, and here we have Todd Bridges. And like Catan, I don't really have the sense that Todd has too many close allies. However, the main thing that puts him above Catan is the fact that he's at least aligned with the Mishas and the Todricks of the world and seems to be more insulated within that group than Catan is to the Carson and Cynthia group. And again, that's a big reason I have him above Catan. But at the end of the day, I don't really have the sense that he's playing the game that hard either. I mean, people weren't super comfortable with him at first, and even now, like it's yes, while he is in the Athletes Alliance, I don't really have the sense that he has that many ride or dies or that many close allies. We do learn a bit more about his game as time goes on. We know that he was upset at Cynthia for voting against him after he went on the block through the Gala gift twist. Obviously, I mean, he was never really in danger of going home, as either way, like the two sides were solidified 5-3 with Teddy going home and the other side voting for Mirai. It's just that after he was put on the block, all those Mirai votes just ended up going onto him. So, but at the end of the day, he was never in that much danger going home, but he was still pretty upset about it nonetheless. Obviously, we see some people talk not great things about him. I mean, obviously, we know that Chris Kattan hates him. We know that Teddy referred to him as hard to stomach after the fact. But again, he's was never really much danger of going home this round with Kirkpatrick as HOH, as Kirkpatrick seems more intent on targeting the Mirais and at worst the Carsons and Cynthia side of things more so. Again, we know at this point that he's pretty loyal to the Athletes Alliance, but at the end of the day, I don't really see how he wins the game. He doesn't seem to be too well respected at the end of the day. And because of that, I have him here at number 8. Now we're moving on to number 7. And again, this is another person I wish I could have had a bit higher, but I feel like the game hasn't really worked out in their favor too much. And here we have Carson Cressley. And again, early on, I would have had him pretty high. I mean, obviously, he forms this day one alliance with Cynthia, Shanna, and Todrick. Obviously, through that, they are part of the formation. He is put up as a pawn. However, obviously, he wins the veto and is able to take himself down as a result. We see him build a very close relationship with Cynthia and Teddy, which obviously gets him in trouble where Misha feels threatened by that and through that starts targeting Teddy. Like, and we see through that Carson and Cynthia really fight to protect Teddy, and obviously campaign against Mirai. Cynthia, of course, gets the Gala gift, which later allows her to start the series of events that leads to a new replacement nominee going up. Obviously, with her and Carson kind of on the outs, they aren't really able to work that into their favor. Obviously, Todd ends up on the block instead. Like they don't really have the numbers to save Teddy as a result, so that's not particularly great. And going to this round, like him and Cynthia were in quite a bit of danger to where if Todrick had won the HOH, he was going to be the main target for this week. Now, fortunately for him, Kirkpatrick won HOH instead, which was obviously one of his better case scenarios, as Kirkpatrick was more committed to targeting Mirai, but still not particularly great at the end of the day. I mean, I feel like he is still looked at as his big target, and I feel like if Todrick were to win HOH next, or even if Misha were to win it again, then I feel like Carson would be the main target there. So obviously that's not particularly great, and I feel like this week he hasn't really been playing too hard. I mean, yes, we see Shayna trying to replace his relationship with him, as obviously Shayna promised Carson and Cynthia that she would vote with them, but obviously didn't at the end of the day. And I feel like he hasn't done that much lobbying, like aside from that, so that's not particularly great. And plus, I feel like while he wasn't being targeted this week, I feel like he could very well potentially be targeted in the future. And because of that, I have him here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and we have someone who's very similar to Carson position wise. And here we have Cynthia Bailey. And like I said, I mean, obviously a lot of her game is involved around Carson, where obviously she was part of that day one alliance with him. And obviously they formed the formation with her side and then Misha's side on another. She wins the gala gift, which ensures her safety. And obviously, aside from that, it's kind of downhill from there, where her ally Carson, really both of her allies, Carson and Teddy, are put up on the block with Teddy as a target. I mean, after that, we see her fight to keep Teddy in the game, and then obviously she assumes that Shanna is on her side and is lobbying Chris Kirkpatrick to work with them. But obviously, at the end of the day, they were just playing both sides, and they aren't able to get anything. Now, to her credit, she does try to recruit Todd as well, but that doesn't really work out. And we see her on the night of eviction, use the gala gift, which gives her the power to indirectly name a third replacement nominee. But obviously, with her and Carson on the outs, and with Shayna and Kirkpatrick not really working with them, we see that she isn't able to get what she wants. She gets Todd on the block instead. Obviously, we see her vote for Todd, and for whatever reason, Todd takes this very personally. Like he gets very upset at Cynthia at the fact, but it's like, I mean, nothing really changed. It wasn't really against you, but I mean, there's that. And then I feel like aside from that, she hasn't really done much. Aside from that, I mean, yes, she is repairing a relationship with Shayna, but even then, it's unclear whether Shayna will work with them moving forward. It's just very questionable at the moment, where things lie with them. And again, Kirkpatrick winning HOH probably helps her case, as he's more committed to targeting Mirai than anyone else. But at the end of the day, I feel like she isn't in too great of a position either. The main reason I have her above Carson, though, is because I feel like Carson is more blatant as a threat, and I feel like he's more likely to be targeted sooner than Cynthia is. So because of that, I have her here at number 6. Now we're moving on to number 5, and this is a really weird person to talk about, as this is a person who has openly admitted to wanting to leave the game, and here we have Lamar Odom. And like I said, I wouldn't say wants to quit the game per se, but he has told people that he'll be okay with being evicted. But the reason I have him as high as he is because of how well positioned he is and how well liked he is in the house. I mean, obviously, we see him early on being part of the Athletes Alliance with Misha and Todrick. I mean, he does get into a bit of drama with Teddy, but at the end of the day, doesn't hurt him too much. As we see Teddy after leaving the house, call him a competitor, and that he's very disarming of people. And he's able to play this very effective game. So even with someone he had some drama with, he was able to come out of that looking relatively good. And aside from that, obviously he's with the Athletes Alliance. He votes for Teddy, which obviously wins out the day. In week 2, again, he hasn't really done much. In fact, he doesn't really play the game much at all. And like I said, in this past week, he has said that he is fine with being evicted and supposedly asked Patrick to nominate him. I mean, that didn't end up happening. But at the end of the day, he is very well liked in the house, and I feel like he does have the potential to make it very far as long as he doesn't do anything to actively sabotage his game. Now, will he do that? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's kind of crazy. He says that he's already accomplished everything he wants to do in the house and that he wants to leave. And There is potential for him to be put up, like if Mirai were to win the veto, and they could potentially respect his wishes as a result. But the fact that he's so well liked and so well positioned to where I feel like if he's able to get past that and stay in the game, that I feel like he could make it decently far. But because of him not being fully in the game, I decided to have him here at number 5. Now we're moving on to number 4, and we have someone who is playing how I expected him to, and he seems to be doing well on the surface, but obviously there's a ton of messiness involved. And here we have Todrick Hall, and the thing about Todrick is we see him play very hard from early on, where, yes, he's a part of Carson's day one alliance through their previous relationship, but we obviously see him build a relationship with Misha Tate, like the first HOH, and he's included on the Athletes Alliance. So early on, he is kind of playing this middle position. The problem is that he ends up distancing himself from the Carson side of things and really goes all in on the Misha and the athlete side of things. And the way he handles Carson in particular is terrible, where he talks about how he wasn't as close to him on like their work on RuPaul. Like they talk, like he gives a lot of very personal reasons for not working with Carson anymore, which obviously burns our relationship. And we obviously see that as well with Teddy, where he tells Teddy that he was playing both sides, and he really doesn't own up to his game through that. Like we see him try to smooth things over, but Teddy is just having none of it. And we see Teddy on her way out call him untrustworthy. It's just very messy how he handled that situation. And then obviously, he's happy that Kirkpatrick wins the next HOH, and he's fine with the target there. We see him really push for Kirkpatrick to target Carson instead, but obviously he understands that Kirkpatrick wants to target Mirai instead. And I feel like he's not in the worst position in the world, but obviously we see him like kind of have to change his game quite a bit if he wants any chance of moving forward. I mean, we see certain people want to target him at this point through his poor social play. And to his credit, he is playing relatively hard to do so. It's just, can he win a jury vote at the end? And I'm starting to really question that. I feel like if he gets to the end, he'll just have a bunch of people who don't really respect him, and I think that's a big problem for him. Yeah, like I feel like there are ways for him to maneuver the situation, possibly get back with the Carson and Cynthias of the world. Although the way he handled them before makes that a bit more difficult for him to do. So at the end of the day, I feel like Todrick did start off the game in a relatively strong position, and I feel like he has shown that he's willing to play very hard. In fact, I'd say he's playing the hardest out of anyone in the house. It's just he's done it in a very messy way, and he has a pretty bad social game at the end of the day that has caused people to turn on him. So because of that, I have him here at number 4. Now we're moving on to number 3, and we have someone who probably hasn't been as messy as Todrick, but still not immune to making mistakes. And here we have Misha Tate. Now, obviously, Misha won the first HOH, and I feel like for the most part, she handles it well, where she builds this core alliance of her, Todrick, Lamar, and Chris Kirkpatrick. Now, obviously, there are some mistakes there where obviously during the HOH comp, we saw Todrick make a deal with her to where she wouldn't target him if she won HOH. But then Teddy immediately tries to make a similar deal, but then she just rejects it. And I feel like that was kind of sketchy. I felt like she could have handled that situation a bit better. But obviously, we see her target Teddy later on as Carson and Cynthia were very closely aligned to her, and obviously, she cared a lot about ensuring that her side of things had more influence inside the formation. We see Todrick fully commit to her, which I think was somewhat impressive as well. And then obviously, we see her get her way at the end of the day, where they obviously are able to win out 5-3. And then the next round, we have Chris Kirkpatrick win the HOH, which is somewhat favorable to her as well. Where obviously Kirkpatrick is supposedly initially putting up Carson and Mirai with Mirai as a target, but we see her like before then like really push for him to put up Carson even after Kirkpatrick tries to put up Catan as the pawn. And I feel like she pushes a bit too hard for this. Like I think the way she handled that probably isn't the best look. Like and could potentially damage some of her relationships with Kirkpatrick and Shanna moving forward. But at the end of the day, she sits back and allows Kirkpatrick to put up Catan and Mirai in her place. And it should be interesting how this plays out, where obviously Mirai is a number for Misha, even after the whole situation of last week. So obviously losing Mirai here wouldn't be ideal for her. So I can understand why she's doing it, but I still feel like she has made some small mistakes along the way. I mean, obviously, there's her outright rejecting Teddy's deal during the first HOH. There's her really pushing Kirkpatrick, even after it became apparent that Kirkpatrick was having none of it. I don't think that's particularly great either. And I feel like if Mirai goes home, that obviously could leave her side open to be taken out in the future. Admittedly, I feel like Todrick is more likely to be targeted before her, but it's still not particularly that great of a position. And it's sort of weird that I have a game like this at number three, but considering the rest of the field and the fact that this is Celebrity Big Brother, I feel like she did enough there with building the core power structure to be at number three. Now we're moving on to number two, and for me, this is the definitive top two. I feel like these two players have been playing the best game so far. And at number two, we have the current HOH. We have Chris Kirkpatrick. And I feel like Kirkpatrick has played relatively well as well, but not without some issues. I mean, obviously, first we have to talk about the Mirai situation. Now, again, we didn't see what happened on the live feeds as it happened before the live feeds started playing, but supposedly he made Mirai feel uncomfortable, and which isn't particularly great. I mean, obviously we don't know the full context yet, but if that's true, then it's still not great that he's handling it that way. And obviously that is sort of a pretext for him targeting Mirai this week. So that's not particularly great. And also, I should acknowledge the fact that he did leave the house at one point at the beginning of the game due to supposedly a false positive COVID test. Obviously, that ended up being a false positive, and he was allowed to re enter the game. But still, that was something I should probably mention. But if we're looking beyond that, I feel like he has played the game relatively well. I mean, obviously, early on, he's part of the Athletes Alliance, even though he's not technically an athlete, but whatever. Uh, Obviously, we see him work alongside Misha for a lot of the week as well. But obviously, what really helps this case is the fact that he builds a strong relationship with Shayna, and we see that really play out during his HOH reign, where obviously he's very close to Shayna, and he and Shayna have really worked to sort of play the center, especially now that Todrick has sort of abdicated that position. We see Kirkpatrick and Shayna really try to play this middle ground between the Carson side of things and the Misha Todrick side of things. And we really get a lot of his thought process through this. We see him talking to much of the house in the lead up to the nominations, and ultimately, I feel like he does pick the right nominees in Mirai and Catan, with Catan as the pawn. Again, not really aligned with anyone, shouldn't really upset anyone. And then Mirai is, again, say what you want about that situation, but obviously targeting Mirai is effective in that it does take a number away from the Misha and Todrick side of things without it seeming like he's actually taking that shot at them. Now, obviously, I feel like him working along with Shayna is pretty effective as well. I feel like he has done a decent job at building relationships in the house and with maintaining this appearance of a middle position. Obviously, Todrick and Misha are picking up on the fact that obviously targeting Mirai would cost him a number, but I feel like he's not really being targeted either. So I feel like there are some credit to the way he's handled this HOH. But obviously, the biggest negative is his relationship with Mirai. I feel like Mirai is someone who is very unlikely to vote for him at this point. It obviously when she leaves the house, and again, I feel like I could see him potentially being targeted before this next person we'll be talking about, as he was the most recent HOH, and obviously, obviously he could still like maneuver the game pretty well. So I think there's still quite a bit to credit to Kirkpatrick's game, and I'm very interested to see how he'll maneuver after his HOH is done. But for now, I feel like number two is about as high as I can put him. And now at number one, the person I think is the most likely to win Celebrity Big Brother 3 at this point is Shayna Moakler. Now, this was sort of weird for me. I wasn't expecting her to be playing as well as she is, but she is. I mean, obviously we see her early on building being part of Carson's Day One Alliance, being a part of Formation. However, we see her start to play both sides. And obviously, we see going into the first eviction that Carson and Cynthia were expecting her to vote with them to save Teddy. Obviously, she doesn't do that and ultimately sides more with the Mishas and Tates of the world. And I feel like that was a pretty effective decision for her, as obviously before, while she was in Carson's alliance, with Teddy there and with Carson and Cynthia building that great bond with her, she was kind of the fourth in that situation. So it made sense for her to get rid of Teddy. Now we do see Carson and Cynthia get a bit betrayed by her as they assumed that she was voting with them. But I feel like over this past round, she has done a great job at mending those relationships and really getting them back into her corner. I feel like she's been pretty effective in that respect. And obviously, her closest relationship is to Chris Kirkpatrick, the current HOH. Obviously, Kirkpatrick talks a lot of game with her, and through this, they've effectively been playing this middle game. Something that Todrick wanted to play, but they've just been doing it a lot more effectively. And obviously, Shayna has a ton of great relationships in the house. I mean, she's close to Kirkpatrick. I mean, she's relatively close to Misha and Todrick as well. And obviously, she's been playing this middle ground as well. I feel like she's someone who, if she's able to maintain this position, will be taken very deep into the game and someone who could very well win a jury vote at the very end. I've just been pretty impressed by the game she has played, and I could see her winning over Chris Kirkpatrick in a jury vote, which is a big reason I have her above Chris Kirkpatrick here. It'll be very interesting to see how the rest of the game plays out. But for now, I consider Shayna Moakler the most likely person to win Celebrity Big Brother 3. And there we go. That will do it for this week's Power Rankings for Celebrity Big Brother 3. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. I'll probably do these on Mondays moving forward. Definitely updating the Power Rankings to reflect the game. Obviously, it's only a couple weeks, so I mean, it's not going to be too long, but it's still pretty fun to break down how this season is going so far. Obviously, I'm also covering Australian Survivor right now. I'm covering Amazing Race 33, and next month I'll be covering Survivor 42 once that starts. Stay tuned for that. But for now, that is the video. See ya.